Hey everybody, welcome to today's live stream with Dr. Rawls and the Vital Plan and Rawls MD team here. Looking forward to sharing some information about Dr. Rawls' new book, The Cellular Wellness Solution. We are very excited to have this in print and being distributed, and already getting some great reviews from it so far. Dr. Rawls, if you want to join us here, we're just going to have a little casual time here to answer any questions you've got about the book and hear from Dr. Rawls about the writing of the book and what is in it and some neat things about natural health. So thanks for being here, Dr. Rawls.
Hey, thank you, Tim.
Yeah, awesome. Well, just for folks that don't know you, maybe you could introduce a little bit about who you are and how you got into herbs and how you got into writing this book.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I have been a physician for over 30 years. About a third of that has been helping people overcome chronic illnesses that really are very resistant to therapies or are poorly understood by the conventional medical system, such as fibromyalgia and chronic Lyme disease and a whole lot of other things. But that journey has led me to some interesting places in really looking at chronic illness completely differently than I was trained in medical school. And most physicians are conventionally trained. So that's what the book is about. So it really goes beyond that chronic illness journey, more toward how do we all stay well? So it's that concept of looking at the spectrum between wellness and illness, and how do we all move toward that wellness end and stay there for our whole lives.
Awesome. Well, how long have you been working on this book, Dr. Rawls? What did it take to get it put together, and how is it different than some of your other books you've written?
Yes, I've always used writing as a way to understand things, because if you can write about something, if you can figure out how to put the words on paper for other people to understand, then it forces you to better understand it yourself. So I've been writing for a long time. My first book was over a decade ago, just helping my patients understand health habits and how they mattered. And later, I wrote a book about chronic Lyme disease. But this one is really a culmination of all of my journey over the past decade to 2 decades, really my whole life as a physician. Exploring these concepts, why people actually become ill. And I think that's really a big thing that's missing in our conventional medical system. We treat illness, but we don't take the time to define, well, why is this person ill and how can we reverse that? It's more about how do we get rid of their symptoms. And I just don't think that's adequate. So it was a deep dive. The whole book took 3 years. And the first 2 years was researching it, putting the information together. And then the last year was really making it palatable for the average person, so it was user friendly and easy to read. And for that, I got a lot of help from people like you, Tim, and others who read and reread and gave me feedback and helped out with the process of just making it understandable to really anybody. And that's the feedback that we're getting. People are saying that it's very user friendly, it's very well laid out, and it's easy to read. And that, you can convey information, but if you don't make it such that it's easy to consume, people are just not going to get it.
Yeah. And I think that is a neat thing about this book. It has been such a community effort, although it is your baby, Dr. Rawls. I think kudos to you for allowing so much feedback from our community. We've got a lot of ambassadors and customers that read early copies to help provide feedback on what would be most useful. And so that is kind of neat that a lot of people have really helped birth this project, so to speak.
Yeah.
And welcome to those of you that are joining. I see Michael and Debbie and others. Welcome. Good to see you here. We're just having a casual conversation about Dr. Rawls' new book, The Cellular Wellness Solution. And if you've got any questions about the book or about cellular wellness, healthy aging, things like that, feel free to send those into the chat, and we can pose those to Dr. Rawls for answering. And yeah, we'll just keep on chatting. But I think you're so right about that, Dr. Rawls. The challenge of trying to understand what is really going on underneath these symptoms. I feel that when I go to the doctor, and having worked a lot with you and with all this material, I'm always kind of pushing them to be like, well, do you have any idea why this, what's causing this, or what I can do to prevent this from happening in the first place? And the conversation just does not go there a lot of times. And so I think it's this conversation as a culture to really shift how we can look at this and start asking different questions. So I think you do a great job of that in the book. And on that note, maybe you could just start by giving a little summary of what is cellular health, and why do you look at that, for this root of health?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing that's come out of all this work, all this deep research for years and years. And I came to realize that in our society, conventional medicine, we make things more complicated than they really need to be sometimes. And the concepts in this book are simple, but they're powerful. So the basic premise is that the human body is composed of living cells. There are about 200 different kinds of cells in the body. Everything that happens in the body results from the action of cells. If you have symptoms of any kind, whether that's heart symptoms or joint pain or trouble swallowing, it's because the functions of cells are compromised. And that just doesn't happen. There has to be some kind of stress, some kind of insult to the cells that keeps them from doing their function. So that's what symptoms are. Symptoms are cells that have been stressed or injured. And so the types of cells affected are the types of cells that are being affected define the symptoms that are happening. So what healing is, we hear that word healing all the time. What healing is the ability of cells to recover from stress, either repair internal damage or regenerate new cells. So that's really important. So when healing occurs, the symptoms resolve. Symptoms become chronic when stresses are ongoing. So if the stresses never go away, if they're just nonstop, then symptoms keep adding up, and eventually we define it as a chronic illness. So chronic illness is impaired healing or ongoing stresses that keep cells from actually healing. Because there are hundreds of different cells in the body and lots of different ways they can be stressed, we have lots and lots of different kinds, thousands of different chronic illnesses. But the premise of how to solve that problem is pretty basic. You remove the cellular stress. But that's not how we go about it in conventional medicine. What we do is affect cellular functions using drugs, which either affect enzymes, block enzymes, or affect receptors to affect cellular functions, so that we reduce symptoms and sometimes slow the process of disease. But drugs have no effect, virtually none, on reducing cellular stress. So drugs don't promote healing. Drugs don't help us get well. And that's the difference between drugs and herbs. Fundamental difference right there. Drugs don't promote healing. How herbs work, the herbs that I talk about in the book, what they're doing is reducing cellular stress. And I was able to find science on virtually every type of cellular stress and found that herbs actually reduce all forms of cellular distress. By reducing cellular stress, we allow our cells to regenerate. So herbs actually promote healing. That's extraordinary. Something that actually promotes healing and puts us in a pathway of getting well. That's something that drugs just have very little capacity to do. So using herbs doesn't exclude drugs, but wow, we should be paying attention to this. It's like really important.
Yeah. Got some good comments coming in here. Laura says, "Love the book. Planning to buy more copies for families and family and friends." So great. Thanks, Laura. And they had a question about chlorella, Dr. Rawls. You started talking about herbs. Chlorella is a freshwater algae. Would you talk a little bit about how chlorella can be helpful for what it might be helpful for, how it plays into this cellular health solution?
Chlorella is great. It especially if you're recovering from some kind of illness. Chlorella does numerous things. Chlorella has a lot of really important cellular nutrients, but it's also a good source of chlorophyll. So when we talk about the process of detoxification, so many people are taking products that just stay in the gut to bind toxins in the gut, but that's not where the toxins are. When we get toxic, it's because toxins are accumulating around our cells and within our cells because cells just aren't getting the blood flow they need and they aren't getting, so these things are concentrated and tissues become just congested with all of this stuff. So binders like clay and things that people use aren't really doing that much to pull those toxins away from cells. Chlorophyll is actually helping to bind those toxins at the cellular level and pull them away from cells, which is really remarkably important. So I see chlorella as being a really valuable tool in helping us detoxify our bodies, especially when we're more toxic, which is what a state of chronic illness is. Red light therapy, that's one new on the horizon that's gotten a lot of attention lately. And I think it's a nice complement to herbs. Herbs are so easy. You can do all these wonderful things for your cells as far as reducing cellular stress that you can take every day as an ongoing protocol to keep yourself healthy. That's really important. So that little handful of herbs a day can just do wonderful things. What we're doing with red light therapy, I think, more than anything else, is just energizing ourselves. So during chronic illness or cellular stress, cells become energy deprived. You getting extra energy gives them what they need to help recover from the different types of stress. So red light therapy is energizing our cells. It's basically adding energy to the processes of our cells. So it's doing a lot of things just by adding energy to improving cellular functions.
Very cool. If you would like to get a copy of the book, you can get that over at cellularwellness.com. Visit there to get a copy of Dr. Rawls' book. And also there's some extras, the digital resources that come with the book. So make sure you send us a receipt of that, and then we'll give you those extras. I want to go back to a question that came up here, Dr. Rawls, from Michael, talking about the tens of millions of cells that are not our own. Why don't we talk a little bit about our microbiome and maybe some of the interesting things that you're finding out about microbes in relation to healthy aging and chronic illness?
Yeah, no doubt. The microbe component is big, and I learned about it through my experience with chronic Lyme disease, but realized it's not limited to chronic Lyme disease. In fact, I found connections between microbes and virtually every chronic illness. So, this idea that the microbes of the body are isolated to the gut and skin is being disproven. It appears that we actually have a microbiome of our tissues, including our brain. Hundreds of species of bacteria live inside our brain. So it's we definitely have microbes that we have to deal with. Most of these microbes live inside cells. So intracellular microbes are being connected to many different chronic illnesses. And I think it's a big part of what herbs are doing by helping us overcome these microbes. Now, when we say that, yeah, there's millions and millions of cells that aren't ours, referring to bacteria, they referring to bacteria, it is true that, yeah, are we still out there, Tim?
Yeah, we're still alive.
Okay.
Just had a little chat activity you need to take care of.
Okay, good.
You're
So
good.
we so we do have bacteria, but you have to understand that bacteria are somewhere between 100 to 1,000 times smaller than our cells. That means you could get 1,000 of some kinds of bacteria inside a cell, and yeah, not make that much difference in cellular functions. Evidence that I've been reading recently is that intracellular bacteria can live inside a cell for a long period of time without necessarily killing the cell. The cell may be compromised, but it still functions. So if you can imagine cells throughout your body with microbes just living inside, that is kind of crazy. But yeah, it appears that it's a real life thing. And when you collect enough of that, when it becomes significant, you start having enough cellular stress that you start having symptoms, chronic symptoms. So if your cells are stressed already by bad food or mold in your environment or a variety of different stress factors, your cells are more open. You're more vulnerable to be invaded by microbes. And once the microbes become established, the symptoms become established. Not only that, the immune system is reacting to these microbes by producing antibodies to the cells, which can kill normal cells, which is basically what autoimmunity is. So I think all of the autoimmune illnesses, you have to have a microbe variable there. Not necessarily a specific microbe, but yeah, microbes, maybe sometimes more than one type of microbe all at once. So that microbe piece of the puzzle is really interesting. And it is one of the things that herbs are so good for because all of the herbs have antimicrobial properties, but they don't interrupt the normal balance of the microbes in the body, our microbiome. So they actually promote a healthy microbiome while they're suppressing these intracellular pathogens. But the herbs also are counteracting all the other cellular stress factors, free radicals, radiation, trauma, all kinds of different things. And that helps create that environment where cells can recover from being stressed. We call it a healing environment.
So with these microbes, like you said, we associate them with certain conditions like Lyme. We know that there's bacteria behind that. But what are some of the other biggies that people often face or worry about with aging, where these microbes also come into play?
Yeah, as we age, our cells age. So, what aging is the loss of functional cells as you go through life. You hit peak cell count about age 20. At that point in time, you have about 5 to 10 more cells, 5 to 10 times the number of cells you need to survive, and your cells are all brand new and healthy. So after that point, you gradually lose functional cells through your lifetime. Your microbes, though, the microbes that you collect through your lifetime don't age in the same way that your cells age. So in a way, while our cells are aging, our microbes are staying strong. And so as we get older, our cells become more vulnerable to these intracellular microbes, to new microbes that we might acquire along the way, but also microbes that we've been carrying all along that are embedded in our cells and in our tissues. So I think we're going to find more and more connections to diseases like dementia with the microbes. This idea that we have a microbiome of the brain with hundreds of species of microbes that has now been well proven. Gosh, and they've looked at studies and they found this in association with multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease. Gosh, how do you overlook that as a potential cause? And the way you overlook it, or why you overlook it, is because if you don't have anything that treats it, because the antibiotics don't really help with these kinds of microbes because they're inside cells, and using antibiotics should disrupt the microbiome. So, because conventional medicine doesn't really have anything to fix it, it just basically ignores it, which is why it's really important for us as individuals to start paying attention to things like herbs and possibly red light therapy and things that actually promote cellular wellness that make our cells less vulnerable to microbes so we can hold on to our health as we go through life and as we get older, especially.
If you're just joining us, we are talking with Dr. Bill Rawls about his latest book, The Cellular Wellness Solution. And we're getting questions from all of you. Thanks for those. If you've got any more, send them our way. If you don't have a copy of the book yet, you can get one over at cellularwellness.com. And there's some great extra resources that come with that when you buy the book. So you can shoot us your receipt over there, and we'll get those to you. Next question here, Dr. Rawls. We've got one from Nancy wondering about the role of food. And could you talk about how that fits in with the herb picture? Because they both have these phytonutrients you talk about, but what's the role of healthy food? How's that fit in with herbs?
Yeah. Hey, food and herbs, the big difference is how we grow them in essence. So if you look at what our cells need as far as nutrients, our cells are groomed by hundreds of thousands of years of genetics to need certain nutrients and not do well with others. So for hundreds of thousands of years, people ate a forage food diet that was very low in carbohydrates and fat. Now, in the past 100 years, we've shifted almost exclusively to a diet that is very high in carbohydrates and fat. And our cells just aren't used to that. But when you look at our modern foods, even if you're eating a healthy diet and cutting back on the processed carbohydrates and not eating a lot of fatty meat, it's still hard to get everything that you need to protect your cells. So all of our food plants, broccoli, celery, squash, have been cultivated for one purpose, one primary purpose, to produce calories. All of our food plants, wheat, corn, bananas, they've all been grown to produce calories. If you look at an ancient carrot, it wasn't orange and it barely had anything on the root that actually looked like a carrot. So we cultivated this over time to produce more and more calories. As we have done that thousands of years of cultivating food, and especially over the past hundreds of years, we have created plants that don't have protective phytochemicals. They don't need them anymore because we protect those plants with pesticides and herbicides, and we groom them in a very controlled, stress-free environment for the purpose of producing as much in the way of calories as possible. So these plants still do have some protective phytochemicals like broccoli and celery. They're great to eat, but they don't have the same as as their wild cousins once had. So what we're not getting from our food is phytochemicals that protect us from free radicals, microbes, and all kinds of other stress, at least not in the degree that our cells need. When you look at herbs, herbs come from wild plants that aren't cultivated to produce calories. They are cultivated under conditions to maximize the yield of the protective phytochemicals. In other words, under natural stresses. So they'll produce the chemicals to fend off microbes and free radicals and all of these other stress factors that are present in the natural environment. So that gives our herbs a really nice advantage over any food plant, and it in a way replaces what's been missing for so long, that so many people just aren't getting the kind of cellular protection that they need. So if I was to define one main deficiency in our diet today, it wouldn't be nutrients as most people might think. it would be these protective phytochemicals. And the way to replace them is by taking herbs.
Glad you're enjoying the book, Michelle. See some other great questions coming in from Rosemary and Jessica. I think Rosemary's looks really interesting, Dr. Rawls. When you're talking about suppressing microbes, are you using the word suppress because killing them would be too hard on the body, or what do you mean by that? Can you explain that for Rosemary?
Yeah, these things are inside of our cells. And when we look at chronic Lyme disease or other kinds of things, it appears that no matter what you do, you're going to have some microbes that are traversing your insides and living inside your cells. So I don't think we're eradicating them. Do the herbs have killing power? Yes, we as far as we get, we've learned so much from chronic Lyme disease. There was a Johns Hopkins study that looked at several of our main herbs that we use for Lyme disease, as far as whether they would kill Borrelia, the bacteria associated with Lyme disease. And what they found was that the herbs actually did a better job of killing the bacteria than antibiotics do. That was really interesting. So we do know they have some killing power, but I think when you use that inside a living model with bacteria inside cells, we're not, it's not like we're taking these things and you take it for a month and it eradicates all of the pathogens inside your body. I just don't think it's doing that. I think what it's doing is suppressing some of that growth inside cells and more importantly, killing microbes that might be emerging before they can infect other cells. So when I think of killing, I think people have the concept that we're eradicating all of the bacteria from the body. I just don't think that happens in chronic Lyme disease or anything else. So I think suppressing is a better word because what I found is the key for my long-term health over the past decade has been taking the herbs every day. So I think what it boils down to is yes, we have microbes in our tissues. We all do. Some are worse than others. And that connection to chronic illnesses of every variety is becoming stronger and stronger. And the herbs offer us a way to continually suppress that growth without having any long term repercussions to our body and our cells. In fact, we get long-term benefits instead of penalties like we do with many other therapies.
Yeah, I think that's important to emphasize. There's been this research you referred to with Lyme, but also there's been tons of research on other microbes. I mean, E. coli, MRSA, a lot of different viruses as well. There's been a lot of interesting research with the pandemic as well on that. So, yeah, a number of different microbes that are suppressed.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Tim.
Also, Jessica's wondering if you can take herbs if you're on a low histamine diet.
Oh, absolutely. For folks on a low histamine diet, often associated with mast cell activation syndrome, I find that most people are sensitive to a lot of different things, and including many herbs. But there are always a few herbs that you can take, and it's just trial and error, finding the ones that you tolerate best. And as you do that, as you get your foot in the door, the herbs will actually decrease that histamine response and gradually help get you back to a normal state so you can take a variety of other herbs and go about life a little bit more normally.
And what about safety? That's something that often comes up, especially if people don't, they hear the word unregulated supplements or they're just not familiar with herbs, their doctor's not familiar with herbs. You talk a little bit about, are there certain herbs that are safer than others, or how do you make sure people use them responsibly?
Yeah, this is a big feature in the book that Tim helped me quite a lot with, is we looked at that exact question and we created the spectrum with food plants on one end and herbs that have high toxicity, often that are used as drugs on the other end. So all herbs aren't safe. That would be off in telling you that. But there are a lot of herbs that are down toward the end of the scale, toward the food, that don't have drug-like effects, are primarily useful for their protective effects. And these are the herbs that you can use long-term, that are very safe and very forgiving as far as having a low potential for side effects and adverse reactions. So in the book, that's one of the things we do, is help define that for people, so you know where you can stay safe and things that you can use comfortably without getting into trouble. And a lot of our antimicrobial herbs are in that category, so it helps keep you in the safe spot.
Well, a couple more questions here, and then we should probably wrap up. But we'll do more on this in the future. So definitely stay tuned, everybody. Dr. Rawls, do you want to speak to how to get started with herbs? If it's important to ease in, or any other tips for how to take them? We can do them as spices on our food, or we can get them as supplements. Where do you get the most bang for your buck?
Well, I think there are a lot of ways that you can take herbs. A lot of people start with teas, certainly culinary herbs, enjoying spices in your food. They all add protective phytochemicals that are valuable. But the easiest way to take herbs consistently is some kind of commercial preparation. Not going out and preparing your own herbs. I do some of that, but it's hard to get everything you might want to take in your garden and or in a tea. So commercial preparations do make that easy. The two main ways to be getting it are tinctures, which you basically take the dried plant and soak it in water and alcohol, typically, which extracts the chemicals, and then you throw away the plant parts. So that's one way of taking it. The downside of tinctures is, they're bitter. A lot of people don't like some of the bitter herbs, and you do get alcohol. Another way, though, that we commonly use is capsules, and that's probably the easiest thing to do. So many herbs do well as a powdered extract. So in this, they're taking the tincture, spraying it on the surface, drying out the water and alcohol, collecting that concentrated powder and putting it in a capsule. So it's a really concentrated way of getting herbs. So the book really outlines everything in getting started and helps you get going. Herbs that are safe to take on a long-term basis, that are very forgiving and easy to start with, that very few people have reactions to. So, but I think anytime you're starting something new, it's always a good idea to start slow. Start with just one or two capsules a day, and then move up to more as you find that you tolerate things.
What one last question here about vitamins. I hear all of these daily benefits from taking herbs, all the protective qualities of these different cell stressors. Do you think it is more helpful to take some sort of daily herbal over a daily multivitamin, or does it just depend? How do they compare herb versus vitamin? What is the difference there?
Yeah, a lot of difference. It's like apples and oranges. They put them all on the same shelf, but they're really different. And yet another study came out from the conventional medical community yesterday, stating that multivitamins really don't have any benefit as far as reducing illness. But there's a lot of variation in vitamins. So a lot of what you're getting in multivitamin products are synthetic forms of the vitamins that aren't readily assimilated into the body. There are situations like chronic illness where the right bioavailable vitamins can be useful, especially the B vitamins and some of the minerals, where you do need that extra. So but the big difference is vitamins are nutrients. Nutrients are things that cells need to perform their functions. So it would make sense that the easiest and the best way to get your nutrients is through food, because the nutrients are slowly absorbed and continually released, such that your cells can use them all the time. They're always there. Whereas if you do one big load of multivitamins, you're not delivering it really in a natural way. So when you look at herbs, we're talking about something completely different. So when we're talking about a commercial herbal product, it's non-nutritive. It's not a good source of vitamins or minerals or any other things that cells need to function. What herbs are is protective. They're protecting cells from stress. And here's something really important that's an observation that I've made. When cells are stressed, they use more nutrients, they work harder, they burn more energy. So they are just burning up nutrients. So if you take herbs and reduce cellular stress, cellular demand for nutrients goes down. So in a way, even though herbs don't provide nutrients that the cell needs, they do reduce cellular stress, which decreases demand for nutrients. So I think that's really an interesting way to look at herbs. The herbs have so many advantages. Not to say that you shouldn't ever take a multivitamin. There's certain places that it is important to pick up those extra nutrients, just a little bit extra, but it should be something that just supplements your regular diet, a good healthy diet, not as a substitute for diet. And you should be taking the herbs to reduce cellular stress because that's where you're going to get your most benefit.
Awesome. Well, I see some other good questions coming in, but we don't have time for any more on this live stream. So hopefully we can do it again. Thanks everyone for being here. Again, if you don't have a copy and you'd like to get one, you can do that over at cellularwellness.com. And we hope you enjoy it. Share it with friends, share it with your doctor, your neighbor, anybody. And I think they'll really enjoy it. So thanks again for being here. Keep an eye out for other sorts of live events. We'll be doing some webinars coming up. Dr. Rawls has been doing a lot of podcasts lately, talking about the new book. So there'll be opportunities for more learning about the book. So Dr. Rawls, I think that's all.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And don't forget to give us feedback, or if you buy the book through Amazon, give us a review.
You got it. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, everybody.